Now we're live. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Jen will be here in just a few moments. I am Peter. Welcome to Generational Change. We have a wonderful panel that is joining us this evening. As a lot of you know, universal healthcare is one of the issues that we talk about constantly on the show, and it is having a resurgence as of late, which is obviously very important. Certainly we were tempered a little bit by the fact that we weren't able to get too far with CalCare in California. But the good news is the momentum keeps building every day. And the fact that I would say that the universal message that's been going around is that we need to remove the for-profit middlemen in between us and our doctors is really taking shape. So we're really looking forward to having this conversation in addition to what may have come up short with CalCare in California, could potentially be mitigated with the New York Health Act in New York, and then how we continue to build this momentum as we go forward throughout the other states. Because as I have emphasized, and as Jen has emphasized on the show before, very importantly, when it comes to things like the legalization of cannabis, when it comes to the issue of gay marriage, these were state issues that passed and then ultimately were ultimately able to pass and now have garnered a lot of momentum at the federal level. And we believe that healthcare is going to be in the similar vein. So with that said, Jen is here, and I apologize. I got the time wrong. I actually said that it was going to be at 8 o'clock on our calendar, but it actually was 7 o'clock.
And he knows that if it's not on the calendar, it doesn't happen easily.
Well, I had to adjust the time.
So Jen with like sort of a half makeup, no mascara situation.
You look fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
So first and foremost, we are going to welcome our first guest. He is a gentleman who has been on our show before, and he is also the champion of CalCare in California. Now, even though he didn't get it through on this go around, we're going to obviously have a very lengthy conversation about what we can do going forward to hopefully take that next step. If not in this election cycle, then hopefully the next one. Representative Ash Kalra, welcome back to Generational Change.
Thank you so much for having me and continuing this conversation.
Hi, Ash. How's it going? I've been saying you have some splaining to do because some of our natives have been restless. So, and I, of course, had your back and said, I am sure that there is solid reason because I know you are not selling our people out. So,
yes. What is a good background? Is this one right?
Yeah, just do the yellow.
Okay.
You're such a, well, that's fine. No, just do the yellow.
Yeah,
there you go.
I don't know why that was coming up as blank before.
Sometimes it happens. Okay.
And of course, we are blessed with the presence of a gentleman who is a renowned whistleblower, as we like to say.
We love whistleblowers
because
here.
We know that somebody who could have actually worked for the private insurance industry for as long as you did and can speak to just how evil they are. He is somebody who obviously knows a thing or two about what needs to be done in order to move forward with the universal health care program, whether at the state level or ultimately federally, of course. And that, of course, is Wendell Potter. Welcome back to Generational Change.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Jan. Thank you, Peter. Representative Kalra, it's wonderful to see you.
Good to see you.
No, it's awesome.
And in the other corner, final corner, I didn't have a chance to tell you.
See, again, just like he didn't tell me we were going on at 7.
Well, Ash understands this very well as a elected representative. Unfortunately, Senator Rivera was not able to join us. There was a scheduling conflict at the last minute. But we are very lucky to have the wonderful Cheryl Cashin, who is one of the chief, I would say, activists with the New York Health Act, who knows everything there is to know about this bill and what we're going to be able to do in Albany going forward. So without further ado, Cheryl Cashin, welcome to Generational Change.
Hi, everyone. Delighted to be here and have this conversation with a couple of my heroes. Thank you.
Nice to meet you. And at least, look, all I'm happy is I could still say we're talking coast-to-coast healthcare. That was sort of like my pitch. So welcome from New York there. Where do you want to start?
Well, I think the best place to start, obviously, is where things are regarding this particular movement. You know, right now we're seeing, look, people can say what they want about it's election season. It pretty much has begun. And now all of a sudden, everybody's talking about universal health care. But the truth is, it is a main talking point in our society today. It isn't something that's considered on the fringe. It's considered, when are we going to get there, not if we're going to get there. I think that that's a fair statement. And right now, how do you guys see it regarding continuing to build momentum? Because at least on the Democratic side, as it appears, you pretty much can't run for office anymore unless you are full-throated backing a universal health care program, with a few exceptions, of course. But it seems to me that almost any new candidate that is running, or any incumbent that's running, that has any intention of keeping their seat, being on the side of universal health care seems to be the order of the day. So how do you guys see it as we approach the midterms, knowing that this is obviously a very volatile election year, to say the least?
I mean, let's start with Ash, because you're just coming out of like the session that doesn't sound like it was as productive as you wanted it to be.
Yeah, we're in the middle of a 2-year session. Obviously, with CalCare, we didn't have the votes this year to move it forward, but there is some hope on the horizon. And what I mean by that is just what was referred to in terms of the election cycle, and there is going to be some turnover in the assembly. That's going to be a positive outcome. In terms, we had we have 80 assembly members, 60 of whom are Democrats, but we had 4 vacancies, and that made a big difference because those were vacancies, at least 3 of which for sure. A couple were co-authors on AB 1400, and the folks that are so far replacing them, at least 2 that have been replaced of the 4 are already strong CalCare supporters. And if you look at the other seats, we're having a lot of folks that are resigning, retiring, running for other seats, more than anyone expected. So this time next year, I think we'll have at least a half a dozen, if not more, not just single payer supporters, but specifically CalCare supporters, and even more specifically, corporate-free Democrats, because that makes a big difference as well. It's one thing for someone to say, I believe in universal health care, I'm for single payer, when they're running. It's easy to say that when you're running. When you're actually in office and now have to do an up or down vote, and then all of a sudden you have all these questions about it, and then there's question marks about whether you're actually there or not. And so I feel hopeful. Look, at the end of the day, this is a generational battle. And I'm so grateful to see what's happening in New York. And I had the pleasure when I was in New York to meet with Assemblymember Gottfried, as well as some of the activists pushing the New York Health Act. And the energy is there from coast to coast. We need more electeds that are very clearly going to be there day one, the moment they step into the office, onto the floor of the Assembly, onto the floor of the Senate, and not have them wavering once they win their election.
Ash, you made an excellent point, which is, again, the next evolution of this whole, I like to call it the non-corporate
It's non-corporate. I mean, that's really the bottom line.
Because
it
people
really
can
is.
co-opt the word progressive. And as you know, being in California, they certainly have. But when you say non-corporate, you have to show your cards. And so a lot of these Democrats they're really dinos. They're Democrats in name only, in the sense that they say one thing, but they'll do something else. If you say that you support healthcare, but in reality, you're taking money from Cigna or Blue Cross, or you could think of any of these major corporations.
I mean, any of them. United, they all suck.
Pfizer or Merck. We could go on and on, but the reality is that corporatized portion of, well, okay, perhaps the Democrats are better than the Republicans, but if they're taking the corporate money, then that's a huge obstacle that we have to overcome. Cheryl, if you could hop in, because we saw what happened with Ash's bill in Sacramento. What is sort of the consensus right now regarding the bill in Albany? Because there's definitely going to be some roadblocks along the way. I mean, as far as I can tell, there's at least 1 or 2 state senators that could potentially be roadblocks to this bill on the Democratic side. How would you assess where things are right now as far as the New York Health Act goes?
Well, thanks. Last legislative session, we had a major disappointment. We had enough on the Assembly and the Senate, and not enough Democrats. We had enough sponsors. So people who ran on the bill and said they sponsored the bill, and that was scary. And so it never came to a vote. And it was exactly what Ash said. When it comes time to actually go up or down, people get cold feet. And so it was a very big disappointment for all of us activists on the activist side. And I think what I learned from just speaking to members, assemblymen, and senators was they weren't hearing enough pressure from their constituents. So it really comes back to us. And I think having the strong progressive voice out there, we have that in New York. It is strong, it's growing, and we're there. We just had a great activist day yesterday in Albany. We need to get to that next layer. And this is where I'd like to say that I think the New York Health Act and all of these single payer bills, they're not progressive legislation, they're practical. And we need to be showing other people who don't necessarily consider themselves progressives that they will benefit from this, and that this devil problem is really a problem that we are so accustomed to thinking our system is so bad it could actually be worse. There is nothing that could happen with the implementation of the New York Health Act that could be worse than our system today. And so we have to reach that part of the constituency to put pressure on our representatives.
Yeah. And Wendell, you can definitely speak to the fact that all the corporatism and how it is so calculated, and how this is by design. It's not like, oh, it's just, a coincidence that this isn't working. I mean, this is years and years of sort of systemic, almost like brainwashing of the public as to what we can and cannot afford. And so would you talk, because I think that's the biggest holdup for people to jump on board, is we've really been taught that this is not something we're deserving of.
Yeah.
Oh, you're exactly right. And I talked to Ash about this at the time that the bill was being considered in the assembly, and I even wrote a letter of support to the Appropriations Committee. And Ash and I spoke afterwards, and we were on an interview program soon after that. Ash, by the way, is one of the very few members of the Democratic legislature that refuses to take any corporate PAC money. And that's a huge thing. And I hope that we'll see more members who refuse to accept corporate PAC money. Corporations like the ones that I work for, Cigna and Humana, spend enormous sums of money to try to block progressive change. And they influence elections as well, too. And members of the legislature know that. They know that even if they don't take contributions from them, that if they support legislation like this, they could find a lot of money being spent to try to defeat them during the next cycle. So that's what it really is. It comes down to. The other thing that I think is important to know is that you don't see a lot of these big insurance companies show their hand. They funnel their money to other groups like the California Chamber of Commerce in particular, which presumably, reportedly, put together a coalition of organizations to push back against this bill, to lie about the bill. And you can be certain that the money to finance that campaign came from my former employers. That's the way the game works.
So they're essentially laundering their money now.
They're
going through more like organizations that seem that they would be independent, right? Or more moderate organizations, and yet they're still nefarious.
That's exactly how they roll. They did this 12 years ago in Washington, and I was there a lot when Congress was debating what became the Affordable Care Act. Big insurance companies did not want that to pass. They tried their best to kill it. When they couldn't kill it, they worked to try to influence it, to write big sections of it. They funneled over $100 million to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce to finance the chamber's anti-reform campaign, and used the same talking points then that they used against Asha's bill and against the New York Health Act. They use the same talking points. They're evergreen. I used to write them, I'm embarrassed to say. So I know how they work.
I think having that sort of reckoning of sorts is something that I think a lot of people need to have, and I think they're afraid to have them. I'm sure you are still probably acquainted with some of them, and I have no doubt that some of them are like, either they just simply can't turn away the money, or they don't really know how to come out of it. But the big difference between the universal healthcare push versus the universal environmental push is that right now we really are still dependent on fossil fuels. We could have the Defense Production Act in place and build that clean energy grid, but I digress. The difference, of course, is we don't actually need for-profit health insurance. Mm-hmm. It is absolutely pointless. It is the biggest scam within our for-profit economy. Yeah. And I think most people are really starting to catch on to it now. And Wendell, you know this very well. I actually had a conversation with my father, of all people, the other day, and he deals with more higher net worth people. And even one of his clients had mused to him how he got, just for going to the hospital for a short treatment, how he ended up getting an over $4,000 bill. And it's like, yeah, just because you can afford it doesn't mean it's right. And even he knows it, it kind of like came to him. It's like, man, if a regular person got hit with a $4,000 bill, how would they be able to pay it? Guess what? They can't pay it. And I take this to the next step, which you guys are probably all very aware of. And I think this is a key talking point for any of the non-corporate candidates who are running in this upcoming election cycle. Everyone knows about the shooting that happened in the Brooklyn subway. What many people don't know is that at least 3 of those people that were shot had to start GoFundMes to pay for their medical bills. If that's not proof positive that this system is broken, I don't know what else is. And it's barbaric on top of that. And Cheryl, if you want to hop in, because to me, this is even more of a talking point for the New York Health Act. Because if it was in place, this BS would not exist.
Exactly.
Everyone's healthcare would be covered, God forbid, from such a tragedy like this.
Well, that's what I always pick up on when I talk about this. You think you're in good shape today. You think you have good coverage today until you try to use it. Everyone, this idea that you're okay and so you don't need to change is such a myth. And it's really just something that it builds all of this resistance. People don't want to give up whatever little security they have, but they don't realize they don't have security. And when you actually try to use the system and all of a sudden you're getting surprise bills, you're getting denied claims, that you just then realize. And we had one of our panels for the New York Health Act, we had a cancer nurse telling us story after story of her patients who delayed treatment because their cancer treatment was denied initially, or they had to go through an approval process. By the time they actually got into treatment, things had advanced. This can affect anyone, even if you think you have good coverage today. So I think that is something we have to remind everyone, that you can find yourself on the other side of this situation very easily. If you lose your job, if you get divorced, if you change your life circumstances, you lose your coverage.
Yeah. Well, the whole association between employment and healthcare has always been ridiculous. But something that came up on our show the other night, we were talking with a YouTuber that's over in the UK, and he brought up something that I thought was really interesting. He actually had to recently do something that I guess he called it, he went through he called it the private, whatever the private sector is.
It's a supplemental
right.
system.
And whatever that was that he did, he said what he paid, and it was still nothing in comparison to what we pay. So it isn't even a matter of that there isn't any profit. I mean, whatever their private sector is or whatever it is, he still had to pay, but it paled in comparison to what we pay here. And the price gouging is a huge problem. I mean, I don't know, is there any other way to get that under control? What do you do to get that under control other than single payer?
Ash, can you speak to one of the biggest problems within the industry, of course, is the fact that it is a for-profit business. And even though it's very hard to prove, there are a lot of doctors, again, most doctors, believe it or not, are actually for a universal healthcare system. But there are the ones that benefit mightily from having very cozy relationships with the big pharma industry. So if you can talk about where the biggest issues lie regarding the roadblocks with CalCare. And there's even been a proposal to potentially try to do a ballot initiative in California, which could be interesting. So how do you see that potentially unfolding, and where do you see the biggest roadblocks as of right now?
Well, it's interesting because people talk about other countries and Germany, Switzerland, they'll say, well, they have private and public, but it's heavily regulated. So the person you talk to from UK saying, oh, there's also private, but it's so heavily regulated, just like our car insurance is heavily regulated. We're not paying $2,000 this year, and then 5 years from now paying $10,000, for car insurance, because it's a very regulated industry. And so that being said, when we have made efforts to try to do cost controls and cost containment, price controls, and we had a ballot initiative just on pharmaceuticals, and the pharmaceutical industry spent over $100 million to defeat it. And so at the end of the day, if someone says to me, oh, well, why don't you do something like a hybrid or what have you? The problem is that we're so infested in this profit taking in our industry that there's no real way for us to ever negotiate some opportunity to have these insurance agents, insurance companies, and hospitals as good actors. They're just never going to be. And so that's why we've got to go for a system like CalCare that is just going to go straight to a single payer system, because our system is so corrupted. So we have to completely cut out the cancer, so to speak, right? And inevitably, we look, first of all, even with my bill, AB 1400 was the policy piece. We've had single payer introduced several times over the last 20 plus years. I'm the first legislator to ever introduce a funding mechanism. That was our ACA 11. That was to go to the voters, because ultimately something of this nature, you've got to get voter buy-in, because it's such a transformational change. And the challenge that's going to exist going to the voters is the industry. If they spend $100 million just on pharmaceuticals, they'll spend as much as $500 million trying to keep us from getting a single payer system. But that's where I tell people, hey, I don't care if polling tells me 70, 80% want it. You now have to show up to the ballot box and actually show that you're willing to fight against this industry and say, yes, this is what we want. So even with the method, the way we were doing it, and having a policy bill, we still also have an ACA, a constitutional amendment to go to the voters, because not only do we have to have a funding mechanism, which is still far less than what we pay now anyway, but we also have constitutional issues that have to be dealt with that we need to go to the voters for. And so ultimately, if we can't get a policy bill through, absolutely, maybe we just got to go to the voters for all of it and just say, you know what, we're doing all of it with the voters because we just can't get this through the legislature. I'm still holding out hope we can do it through the legislature by getting a policy piece through and getting a constitutional amendment to the ballot. If we can do that, that would be the ideal scenario. And so I'm still holding out hope that we're going to be able to do that.
At what point did you realize that this session, it wasn't going to happen? Like you know, at some point you were optimistic, like, okay, we can do this. I feel it. And then something must have happened, or several things must have happened where you realized, yeah, I shouldn't do this now.
Well, it happened very quickly. The thing is, January 31st was literally our deadline that we had to get the policy bill through the assembly. So it was the last 24 to 48 hours, because what had been happening was, because it was the second year of a two-year session, the way that works is that bills have to move very quickly when it comes to January. So we only had a couple weeks to get it through two committees and then get it out the floor of the assembly. We got it through the first committee. We got it through the second committee, but that means we only had a handful of days to get it off the floor of the assembly. And so all the while, I'm having conversations with my colleagues. I'm meeting with them. I had set aside 30, 40 hours of time to meet with them. And we were trying to get, we're counting our votes. Like, how many yes votes do we have? We had gotten as high as 28, and then we just stalled. And it wasn't until the last 24 hours that more and more colleagues were getting back to me saying they weren't there yet, or they weren't going to vote for it. And that's where, so that's why it appeared understandably to the public so rushed. Like, wait a second, I thought this was going to a vote, and all of a sudden it's dead. And the reason why that we couldn't get any more movement beyond, if we had taken it to a vote, maybe we would have gotten to 28, 29, 30, maybe 31, but we needed a 41. And I personally think it would have been devastating to the effort if we had taken it up for a vote and fallen that dramatically short. And especially because the two things, one I mentioned earlier, we are going to have some more single payer friendly legislators next year, but we're not going to have enough to get those extra 10, 11, 12 votes. We're still going to need a half a dozen or maybe even more of the incumbent colleagues. And so given that, I thought it was better to hold it and have the opportunity to get more single payer friendly legislators and have more time to get those 4, 5, 6, 7 more that are incumbent legislators on board. And so that's what the hope is.
Yeah. Is there a way? I mean, I know you know who those people are, but I think what needs to happen is there needs to be a mass campaign in those districts of those people for their constituents to demand it, because they're not going to just do it for fun. So, like, is there a way, like, do you put out that information? Like, these are the legislators that are holding us up. If you live in these districts, you should really be out there, speaking your mind.
Absolutely. And so the way that it would work ideally is that once we know who the new slate of legislators are, a lot of the folks are leaving. Then we know we can do a more kind of accurate sense of where we are. And then working with the nurses, working with other folks that are allies, I mean, they do a great job on the ground, is that you go on the ground of those districts and you run a positive campaign to try to get them there. And I think that's the best case scenario we have. Ultimately, we put it up to a vote because next time around, it's going to go to a vote because we're going to have more votes. And then that way, if there's 4, 5, 6 holdouts, their electorate, their constituents are going to know that. But the reality is that, look, I had the same vote count as the nurses. We were doing it together. They know exactly who was there and who wasn't. So they can organize in those districts to make sure that next time around they're there. And then I do my job, which is over the next several months, work in those districts to get those colleagues on board well in advance of a vote.
Right.
I would ask if, people have suggested doing a ballot initiative. Could you see the value of potentially doing both, continuing on the course that you're on, and then potentially getting, let's say the Bernie movement, if you will, that is substantially big in California, pushing for a ballot initiative for universal health care? Do you think that in conjunction with what you're doing could be of added value to trying to get this thing over the finish line?
I think that it absolutely could be. I think we are on the cusp of getting a policy bill through, certainly through the Assembly to the Senate. And I think if we weren't, let's say we were at 28, 20, 30 votes and the legislature wasn't turning over much next year, that would have given me all the incentive to take it up for a vote because nothing is going to change. Because we're at this particular year, going into next year, we had the opportunity to have a different outcome. That's where I feel we can get a policy bill forward. And if we can get the constitutional amendment to the voters, then it just needs to be passed at 50% plus one. And that's what the difference is between going straight to a ballot initiative on taxation where it may need 2/3 vote. I'm trying to get it to the voters where we only need 50% plus one to make it that much easier for the Bernie movement, single payer movement, nurses, Democratic Socialists, Democratic Party, Progressive Democrat, and the Progressive Caucus Democratic Party to have now a mission ahead. Because and one last thing I want to mention on this one, I'm monopolizing all the time, but by getting a policy bill passed, that then allows the administration to apply for waivers. We cannot apply for waivers until there's legislative authority. And when I met with the administration, very clearly they said that means a bill has to be passed. But it just has to be a policy bill. The financing does not have to be determined at the same time. That's the reason why I was doing it in this order. There is a kind of a rhyme to the reason and a rhythm to this chaos of why it was being done that certain way.
Yeah, no, everyone likes to be Monday morning quarterback on things that they have no idea, which is and I completely figured out that that's what was going on or some semblance of that. But so Wendell, talk about what happens and what kind of gear the insurance companies switch into when there is something like a ballot initiative or some sort of general public campaign that's saying, we want universal health care. And then what's going to happen? Because then I feel like the hammer of Thor comes down.
It happens that way. And we saw it happen in California a few years ago, in particular, when there was a ballot initiative that would have given the Department of Insurance or the insurance commissioner more authority to regulate health insurance plans and, in essence, to be able to reject unreasonable rate increases. It had huge popular support at the beginning, but the insurance industry poured an ungodly amount of money into the effort to kill that. And once again, they worked through their allies or the Chamber of Commerce. They got the California Medical Association involved. So it's they always try to pull together a collection of strange bedfellows to try to push back against something like this. Similar thing happened in Colorado when Colorado a few years ago tried to get a ballot initiative passed. And I worked with those folks, and I saw it actually coming because they were very hopeful that they would get it passed. But I had seen what the industry does. They just will pour tons and tons of money. They will hire local consultants who are close to Democrats or who are able to shape messages in ways that scare people. And by the way, these campaigns are always based on fear and lies, but they just pour so much money into efforts to try to kill ballot initiatives in particular. That's why I'm kind of encouraged with what Ash said here. I think the legislative path is the way to go to try to get this across the finish line. I think that also it's notable that just in the past few days, the Healthy California Commission released its report, very supportive, obviously, of universal coverage. And some of the people who were on that commission have access to enormous sums of money, like the California Endowment and California Healthcare Foundation. Those, by the way, were formed several years ago when two of the very big for-profit and nonprofit health insurance companies in California converted to for-profit status. So they had to put their reserves in a foundation. So that's why you have these big foundations that support universal health care. If we can get those guys to put up some serious money when we've got this really seriously moving again, it'll make a big difference.
Cheryl, what's it like in New York with the misinformation campaign? Because the way we've seen it is we think that you guys are closest to having this done, like in terms of like actually being able to get it through. Talk about whatever misinformation you're seeing there, because I feel like the closer it gets to happening, the more they're going to invest in it not happening.
Yeah, that is for sure. And I think it's even a bigger problem than that. Is we have the misinformation happening, but we have the lack of information about the New York Health Act out there. I mean, I work on single payer health systems all over the world. That's my day job. And I didn't know about the New York Health Act until 2018. So I think that's a problem, that we don't have enough information getting out to people about this incredibly well thought out solution to the problems that we all face. I don't care how good your coverage is. And so that's the number one thing that we're focused on, is getting the information out to people that there is this solution on the table. It could work. It's practical. It is really well thought out. Over 30 years, it has been tweaked and adjusted to take into consideration the concerns of different people. So that's our number one focus, is to get information out there and then to deal with the misinformation. So we're kind of having that two-pronged approach. These are the arguments that you're going to hear, but this is the solution that's on the table, and this is why it's so good. And I think it's person by person. Honestly, it's so grassroots because it's a very complicated topic. And to explain the New York Health Act, it's very complicated. And to sit down with someone, explain to them how their life would be better because of this, and what the lies you're going to hear and why they're not true. And so we need more and more people enlisted in that information campaign, and then the combating the disinformation.
And I was just going to say, where are they with the governor? Like what's going on there with? Obviously, there's been a lot of drama with your governor seat, but where it stands now, if you get that through your assembly, where is that likely to fall in terms of, who is your governor?
Well, we were pretty clear with the last governor that was not going to necessarily, wasn't a supporter. So that was very clear. And I think that was just getting these super majorities and trying to look at, how to overcome that obstacle. Now we're not sure. I can say myself, maybe others are more sure. I'm not sure with the current governor, with the re-election campaign coming up. I think there's an opening to really make that a positive part of that campaign. So we'll see. I don't know enough, but I think it's a really important opening that we have with the new candidate.
Yeah. Do you want to put that up? Roger here, friend of the show, is saying that he thinks that Washington is going to be first. Look, I think this is a great contest to have, but
mass care, there's other ones out there.
Yeah, well, no, and we of course are very supportive of whole Washington. Any of that.
Would you say that Senator Cousins is one of the big roadblocks, and is that somebody who ultimately needs a primary? You tell us what you think is the best way to go about it, because we certainly are. We think the world of New York in terms of the progressive movement. We've maintained that, AOC's victory over Crowley in 2018 really changed the game, especially in New York City. It's inspired so many other people. You have obviously Mondaire Jones, you have Jamal Bowman, and there's others too. We're obviously huge supporters of Melanie DeRigo. We certainly hope that, she gets through. And again, that's at the federal level, but at the state level, which is where this has to happen, there was a slew of victories in the last election cycle led by members of the Sunrise Movement, DSA, and the Working Families Party. But obviously, there are still roadblocks in the way. Would you say that Senator Cousins is one of those roadblocks?
Yeah, I mean, probably she is. And I am also very inspired by the progressive movement. I can feel it. It's moving. However, I live on Eastern Long Island, and when I moved here 12 years ago, I was quite shocked to find out that how the politics were not as clear cut as I was expecting, and there are a lot of deep red pockets, a lot of obstacles in different districts, and so I think we have to make this movement continue to push on this progressive wave, which is very inspiring. But we also have to convince those who don't identify as progressive to support this, because I think otherwise we're just never going to get over that hump in New York. Just the nature of the state, the nature of the politics, once you get outside of New York City and the surrounding areas.
You bring up a really good point. Wendell, you can definitely speak on this. I would say the biggest potential get in the U.S. Senate, maybe in a long time, is John Fetterman in Pennsylvania, who does support universal health care. We are also very friendly with Erica Smith, who's running for the U.S. Congress in North Carolina. The two of them have specifically said that they do not identify as progressive, they identify as populist. I'm thinking that term may very well be the term that a lot of these candidates have to use, because the word progressive has been soured. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And it's been associated with two things that unfortunately are very negative in politics. One, you're too far left. And two, it's been co-opted by corporate candidates claiming to be something that they're not.
Right. Like, look at the Congressional Progressive Caucus. They are anything but progressive. As a group. There are definitely progressives in there, but yeah.
Ash knows Ro Khanna is definitely progressive, but the group as a whole.
Don't get me started. He just endorsed what's his face.
So unfortunately, this is a problem. But from your perspective, how much is that language of populism, you think, resonating? I mean, obviously, Pennsylvania has a lot of similarities to New York in the sense that we know how blue Philadelphia is, much like New York City. But once you get outside of there, it becomes Pennsyltucky in a lot of ways, as they like to say.
Absolutely true. Yeah, I've spent time in Pennsyltucky. I've spent time in Kentucky. That's why I know what I'm talking about here. I used to live in both Tennessee and Kentucky. I live in Pennsylvania now, and I think Fetterman has a real shot. And I agree with how he kind of, I guess you would say, label himself or not label himself as a progressive. I think that's important. And even in blue Philadelphia and the blue parts of Pittsburgh, I think it's important. Language is important. How you characterize yourself, what you say. Even in the Black and brown communities, sometimes the progressive messaging doesn't work there either. It doesn't resonate. So I think speaking more as a populist, I think you're exactly right, Peter. Is more than likely the way we're going to have to go. And I think it is possible too to get business leaders involved in this effort. One of the organizations I lead is Business Leaders.
Our district is all the rich white people in upstate.
And I'm going to be working with folks all across the country on that.
I think you're absolutely correct. And I think that, look, gerrymandering is also a huge problem when it comes to a lot of these representatives. We know how difficult it is. Jen was just showing me the map of
New York Senate District 35.
Yeah, I mean, if you can,
it's extremely gerrymandered. So basically, it's all the wealthy people.
Somebody who's from New Jersey, and I know exactly how this map is drawn, Cheryl. It is painfully obvious that this is all middle to upper middle class and rich white people in the northern suburbs outside of New York City, led, of course, by Scarsdale, which is one of the richest towns in the country. So without question, there is a reason why we still face these roadblocks, but also this perception of red bad, blue good is not true. Non-corporate blue, good. Corporate blue, not good. And so understanding that that is the order of the day is something that we still need to get through. But we also have another big problem that is probably something that you all deal with regularly. And I would like all three of you to comment. And that, of course, is how do you pay for it? Now, of course, if we had a universal healthcare system through Medicare for all at the federal level, that's a different story. But at the state level, you have to work it within the budget. friend of the show, Tom Hartman, has explained that there is sort of this poison pill, if you will, that if you pass it at the state level, there is a limit in terms of what type of federal assistance you can actually get. Now, if we can get past that, again, forgive me for not knowing the specifics of it. Maybe one of you might know what I'm referring to. What is the best explanation that you can give? Like if you're giving that elevator pitch to somebody who says, oh, it sounds like a great idea. I would rather spend, $150 a month on healthcare than $550 a month. But how is that possible? If you can explain that, whoever wants to jump in, go for it.
I have to do that a lot, and so I'm happy to try to continue the argument, because that is clearly one of the most difficult components to challenge when the opposition uses fear tactics and sound bites. It's very easy to attack it with sound bites, and there's a lot of nuance in the response. The reality is that, yes, it is every legitimate study and analysis, including even just now, the governor's Healthcare Affordability Commission just ended. It makes it very clear that our system is unsustainable. Now, that being said, just saying that, well, single payer is less expensive doesn't mean you can just snap your fingers and make it happen, because you're talking about getting rid of copays, deductibles, and what have you, and moving to a new system that does require taxation, which is also a dirty word that's very easy to attack. But the reality is that 70% of our healthcare expenses are essentially government paid for anyway, through state and federal funds. And so we're not talking about a huge delta that we need to bridge. And so when I met with the Department of Health and Human Services, they did say that the waiver programs can cover a wide range of federal programs that come into California, for example, and that if we show cost savings, those extra savings will continue to come to California. Now, what I do hear at times is, well, how do you know if a Republican gets elected and they don't want to fund it anymore? Well, the reality is that Trump did try that with a lot of our ACA waiver programs. It was unsuccessful, because the reality, and we saw that with the Republicans. But how often did the Republicans campaign on getting rid of the Obamacare, getting rid of the Affordable Care Act? When push comes to shove, it was difficult for them to do it, because in those town halls, people didn't want to give up what they had. Once we give people and show them that what they can get, it's very difficult to take it back. But at the end of the day, it does take a leap of faith. We can't hamstring ourselves on what our potential is based upon what the bad guys are going to do someday in the future. If we allow that to happen, we're always going to allow the Trumpers and the right-wing conservatives and the corporate Democrats to dictate what we're allowing ourselves to achieve. And it does take a leap of faith to do that, though, and to say, you know what, we can do this. But we can make this happen, and we can have a waiver program that gets accepted. We can pass a taxation system that is progressive, and we can make sure that families and businesses are paying far less than what they're paying now. And, oh, by the way, make sure the Walmarts and McDonald's of the world are paying their fair share too. That all is possible, but it's only possible if we open up our hearts and our imaginations to it, because the data is on our side. The facts are on our side. But there's no doubt that it will be a difficult argument to win when we're being when the opposition is going to be just infiltrating us with negativity and false facts and fear. And that's what we have to look ourselves in the mirror and say, as activists, as legislators, as academics, as policy wonks, are we willing to win that battle? Because it's not going to be an easy one.
Yeah, I actually like what Cheryl said, in that it can't be worse. And I actually think that that's really important, because right now it's really bad. It's really bad for most people. I mean, the percentages of people that are uninsured, underinsured, it's out of control. GoFundMe is not supposed to be a healthcare program. And so the fact that we're living in it, it's very dystopian. It's really weird. And so when people are worried about losing that, I'm thinking, God, we've really hit the bottom of the barrel. Like you're worried about losing what I think is the worst healthcare in any developed country, and you're worried about that. So what is the best way to sort of portray that? Because it's bad.
Well, and it goes back to this false sense of American exceptionalism that, well, yeah, we have to pay this, that, but we are so much better off than everyone else. And that was part, I know that in Wendell's prior career, that was part of what his job was, to instill in us the sense that, well, yeah, we have issues, but it's way worse in Canada. It's way worse in the UK. Oh, the lines they have to wait in and this, that, and the other. And it's just completely false.
Yeah.
Their arguments are not even that good. You see, this is the thing. And this is why Wendell and I get along so well. We've actually communicated in private. And it's like, unfortunately, our country, individually, we're actually very savvy. But as groups, we're very dumb. And so you see this a lot with this whole like group think of, oh my God, what am I going to lose? I'm not going to get this, that, and the other thing. But I tell the story a lot. I lived in a very nice townhome community in Delray Beach for a number of years. And one of my neighbors happened to be somebody who worked in the for-profit medical supplies business. And he was making an unbelievable amount of money. So much so that he owned a beautiful home on a lake and he drove a C63 Mercedes.
This impresses you. It does nothing.
That's not what I'm saying. Okay. It's not impressing me. I'm saying that people work in this industry. They know what they're doing is bad. They're not stupid. They know what they're doing is bad, but they do it anyway because the money is just so damn good. And I'm thinking that that's one of the biggest pushbacks that all of you have seen. And, Wendell, you could certainly speak to this. Cheryl, I'm sure it's a big problem in New York as well. There are people who profit immensely from this crooked system, and they don't want to give it up. If you are doing a job, even if it's screwing people over left and right, that's making you $300,000 a year, you're not just going to give that up without a fight. And if that means that you personally are going to donate to your representative $10,000 every election cycle to make sure that nothing happens to that business of yours, then, hey, the investment's worth it. If you have to give up 5% of your income in order to make sure that you're making a killing in an industry that shouldn't exist, yeah, I would say that that's a pretty good investment. And I would say that that, probably as much as anything, is one of the biggest obstacles amongst the constituency that we face that people are not talking about as much as I think they should be.
Yeah. Wendell, how do they sleep at night? I'm seriously, at this point, there's no excuse. Like, everyone knows this. The numbers are clear. The most conservative studies have shown that we save money from switching to a single payer. So how do people sleep at night when they really know that they are basically just, stealing all the money?
They compartmentalize. They can see themselves as good people, and they're doing a job. They make money to pay for the kids' education, to pay the mortgage, and they may go to church. They may be involved in their communities. They do things to make them feel like they're good people, and they compartmentalize this part of their lives. The other thing, though, I want to stress is that most people who work for these big companies, even if they make a lot of money, they don't have a lot of visibility necessarily into how decisions are made at the very top. I was unique in having that visibility. So a lot of people, believe it or not, within these big companies are kind of clueless. And you can also lead a pretty good life of being far removed from how people have to experience our healthcare system. They don't necessarily come into contact with people who have to go to GoFundMe to raise money to pay to cover their deductibles before they can get the procedure they have, or to keep from going into bankruptcy. It's complicated, but Peter's right too. A lot of it is just you make a lot of money, and sometimes you can drink a lot and feel better about yourself as you go to sleep at night.
Oh. Okay. Maybe that's how Elon Musk does it.
Or it could be like Hillary Clinton says, which is, it will never come to pass. So go make that money while you can, baby. Yeah. But I think that there's too much momentum now. And I think that probably more than anything else is really what it's about. I want to believe this, Wendell, because you've been on this earth longer than I have. I'm sure you've seen there have been times where, yeah, you thought, all right, now maybe there's some momentum there. Maybe we're starting to catch something. Is it fair to say that this is the closest we've probably been since, frankly, probably since the days of JFK? I mean, he was really the last president who openly, as the commander-in-chief openly said, I mean, if anybody has not seen the video of him speaking at Madison Square Garden in 1962, he basically outlines universal health care to a T and why it was necessary. And I've never seen a president do that since. I would like to think, and obviously Bernie would have been doing that if he was president, but would you say that we are much closer, or maybe as close now as we've ever been? Is that fair?
Without a doubt. There's no doubt that's correct. I think we may think that, well, we haven't been hearing very much about Medicare for all in recent months. And a lot of people around the country are not aware of what's going on in California and New York and Washington and Oregon and a few other places. But I do think you're right. I think we are getting close. We're closer than we ever have been. People are beginning to realize that this system, even with insurance, more and more of us are functionally insured. I was asked to form a coalition, which I lead now, of more than 50 organizations, just to draw attention to the problem of the functionally uninsured, people who have such high deductibles, co-insurance payments, and co-payments that they can't get the care that they need without having to turn to GoFundMe or bankruptcy court. More and more people are realizing what's inevitable for them with the kind of health insurance that they have now. They're more receptive to the idea of, okay, let's try something else.
I would like to think that the more these conversations happen, the more likely we are to get where we're going to go. I don't think we fully grasp, and maybe you guys can, but we talk constantly on the show and we talk amongst our, activist community. There is a lot of nihilism on the political left right now, a lot.
Yeah.
To the extent that they came after Ash in a very nasty, vitriolic way, as if to say, what the hell is the...
Okay, we have to stop this because
Robert, why did you do that?
Oh, thank you, Robert.
It means the world to us.
And by the way, I will say this, is that Robert was one of the very first people in the entire country to reach out and want to support me when I ran for office.
And if you guys see this type of generosity and want to support what Robert is doing, Robert is one of the leaders of the Long Island Activists, one of the best non-corporate groups in the country. They are currently helping Melanie DeRigo with her congressional campaign on Long Island, where the lovely Cheryl is, and are also helping Jumaane Williams in his bid to become the next governor of New York, who has said, and I quote, "I will sign the New York Health Act into law if I am the governor." And of course, obviously, a lot of other great candidates with DSA, the Working Families Party, and of course, the Sunrise Movement. So can't say enough about how great you guys are, and can't say
I wish we had something like that.
Yeah.
We don't have anything like the Long
Well,
Island
we're stuck in Florida. You guys know that. And we already know that he's going to start calling himself President DeSantis in 5
Might
minutes.
as well.
So, that's unfortunately the direction we're heading in right now.
Don't say we didn't warn you, people.
No. And you know what? It is unfortunate. And a lot of you guys know that if there's one thing you could say about DeSantis, he is a smarter Trump and he has even better political instincts. And so today he decided he was going to literally bitch slap the GOP and the Democrats who tried to get through an anti-solar bill in this state on behalf of Florida Power and Light, our energy monopoly, and he vetoed that bill. And you know why he vetoes that bill? Because this man's running for president of the United States and he knows exactly what he's doing.
Oh, we're watching. It's political masterclass.
So thank you, Democrats, for letting this bill even get to his desk so he could veto it and take a victory lap.
All right, we got all off topic. Look what you did, Robert.
Sorry, I had to do that. Sorry, I had to get that out. Right now.
No, let's talk about the hate that Ash had to deal with, because I find it very frustrating as somebody who has been somewhat in public. I am now no longer on social media because the people are too mean. And you don't have that luxury. And if elected, neither would I. But the people are horrible. And for the most part, they have no idea what they're talking about.
And if they do something that's not good, it's kind of like, listen, we don't have to get into, obviously, what you had to deal with going on with Brianna Joy Gray. But the one thing that I would say is that if you're going to criticize somebody with no spot, it makes no sense, because it's like people just want to try to chop AOC's legs off at the stump because they don't like something that she did. We were very critical of the fact that she let down the Amazon workers in Staten Island. That is a legitimate criticism. But if what you're going to do is just readily criticize because I don't like what you didn't do enough for us.
Yeah.
It's, Sam Cedar was on our show, and I always bring this up. The online left does not realize how small their echo chamber really is. So with all the things that you have to deal with, dealing with people who really are your allies and should be, having them literally make you the martyr doesn't make any sense. So what was that like? And would you say we're doing a better job? I think we're doing okay.
Well, I really appreciate the both of you for having these honest conversations, because look, at the end of the day, I know it came from a place of pain. People had a lot of hope. And so I don't take it personally. I was a public defender for 11 years. I have a very thick skin. What bothered me about it, I think it hurts the cause. And I think a lot of my colleagues, some of whom I need to get on board, saw that and saw, wait a second, if they're treating you like that, it doesn't make sense. It didn't make sense to them because they're like, gosh, you've done more than anyone's done on this. And yet they're coming after you. And so it leaves a really bad impression. It makes it much more difficult for me to do my job to eventually get it there. I mean, we didn't have the votes, so it wasn't like it was going to pass. If it was going to pass and I held it, oh yeah, all bets off, 100%. I would earn it in that sense. But it didn't make a lot of sense to come after me in that way. But I also, for some of the folks, I get it. I've talked to a lot of them since then, and since then they understand and they're, back on board the Austrian. They were all supportive of each other, and they were just at that moment, because it happened so fast. I can understand why they were hurt. They didn't understand, and when I've had a chance to explain it, they now understand. There's still some folks that are still going to attack me for it, and that's their right. I just don't see them as part of a movement that's actually going to get this done, because when we actually have to do. It's one thing to be on the outside, and then once you get in, you have to get bills passed. You have to get policy passed. We have to get work done. I'm very proud. I've gotten 40 plus bills passed that are incredibly progressive bills passed in this legislature, in the second most powerful seat of government in the nation. I did that because I've had to keep and maintain relationships inside the building. And I'm unapologetic about where I stand on the issues. A lot of people didn't like the fact I even introduced the bill, let alone got it through 2 committees and got it to the floor of the assembly. And so I think we sometimes have to show grace to one another when we realize that we're in this movement together. As Wendell said, look, I'm one of only 2 out of 120 legislators in California that doesn't take corporate PAC money. So if they want to come after me, I mean, they have the right to, but let make it very clear that I am not bought or sold by anyone. And that I'm, like I said, I still have the heart of a public defender that leads me. And so part of the reason why they spent $6 million against me when I first ran to try to keep me from winning is they know they can't buy my vote. My vote will never be bought. What I'm trying to do is make sure I'm trying to protect the policy. I knew I was going to get attacked. I didn't mind getting attacked in order to protect the policy. The easiest thing for me to do as a politician was to have the bill heard, have it go down in flames, and I get hailed as a hero. I don't care if I'm a hero. I don't care if my name is on the legislature. What I want to do is get it passed and have success so that the next generation doesn't have to deal with what we've had to deal with in our healthcare system.
You are one of the truly good people that are in public office.
I can't fathom what that's like to be one of 2 people. I mean, I think of it even in Congress, the handful of people that are not corporate and what they have to deal with. And then they get crap from people on the outside because they're not doing enough. And it's like we really don't appreciate the people that are on our team. And I think we need to be doing a much better job of that.
And people need real perspective because you do it in the wealthiest part of the United States. Yeah. You do it in the Bay Area, where they literally can, excuse my crudeness for this, they can piss out $2,800 and throw it at a campaign just because they don't like you, just because they don't like what you're doing and you're getting in the way. And we're feeling it down here in South Florida because a lot of people in Silicon Valley are relocating to Miami. So as if Miami didn't have enough problems to begin with.
Why?
Because they don't want to pay state.
Look, I mean, I'll tell you, look, I'm in the capital of Silicon Valley, San Jose. San Jose has more super millionaires percentage-wise than any place in the world. The highest density of super millionaires are those at 30 million or more. And I'm the chair of the labor committee, and I go after tech all the time. And so I'm not afraid to challenge these folks. I do think in the progressive movement, we eat our own and we come after each other rather than having a long-term strategy. And that's partially why not enough far left candidates win, is because it's not about, look, no, I can walk in my district. I'm not Bernie or AOC. And, just because I have support from a broader coalition of progressives doesn't mean my constituents know me. It all starts with your neighborhood, with your constituents. We got to get down to the grassroots of campaigning, not just saying I'm for single payer, I'm for the Green New Deal. Most of our constituents want to know what you're going to do in their neighborhood. How are you going to improve the quality of life in their neighborhood? We got to start with real grassroots politics. And it starts with our own neighborhoods. And when people come to me and say, oh, I want to run for city council, I want to run for this, the first question I ask them is there a neighborhood association where you live? 95% of the time, they can't even answer that question.
Correct.
So if you don't know your own neighborhood, you're not going to get single payer passed at the state. You could have been a Bernie delegate. I was a Bernie Pleo delegate, and my constituents don't care about that. So they want to know what am I going to do for them? And that's what progressives have to understand. You've got to figure out how to do retail politics. Talk to the local community about what I'm a former public defender. I'm far left on criminal justice issues, but I have to be able to understand the pain people feel when their homes are broken into, or their cars broken into, or they're a victim of sexual assault. You can't just say, oh, I think we have to empty the prisons. You have to understand that people feel real pain. How do you speak to that pain and still hold on to your progressive values?
And without question, I try to emphasize this to the because again, I got to stop. I'm not saying progressive anymore. I'm really trying to do populist, non-corporate, because that's really what it is. But we can learn so much from the GOP in terms of how they operate. Because to me, and especially because that party is overwhelmingly supported by people who serve in the military, it is a military-like operation that they run. Everything in the GOP is from the bottom up.
Yep.
Everything. And the only thing you need to know to explain to somebody how can you prove that is very simple. There is no way that somebody like George W. Bush could ever get elected president of the United States.
Wasn't.
Well, of course he wasn't.
Okay.
But without that approach, if he was the standard bearer of the party, there's no way it could have ever been done. Somebody like Barack Obama was able, and Bill Clinton, and you give that to him as well, they were able to do a top-down approach, but there's no foundation there. And that's why during these midterm elections, they get absolutely destroyed, because these foundational approaches are not done. The most important person in the GOP has been said many times before. The precinct committee captain is the most important person in the GOP. And so
we don't even have those here. Most of our precincts don't even have people.
No.
And the Democrats, there's nobody.
And that, without question, is something that is going to need to change going forward. So for those of you in California who want to see this change, it is immensely important that you recognize that that is what needs to change if we're ever going to get this done. Ash, we're going to lead off with you. Anything you want to say before you go? Anything you're working on? And obviously, we'd love to have you back again as always.
Well, I appreciate it. I just want to thank you all for the work you're doing. This is, again, it needs to be a coast-to-coast effort from New York to Washington, California, and even to Florida, because I think that although you're in a difficult position now politically, things can change quickly when people learn or are educated more. And I'll just leave with what Nelson Mandela said, because it does seem daunting, but he would say that it always seems impossible until it's done. And he certainly went through a lot more than any of us did in order to achieve freedom for his country. And so let's not give up, because that's what they want. That's why they spend all the money. They want us to give up. They want us to just to throw up our hands. So let's continue the fight together.
I appreciate that he included us. Most people just want to cut us off, but that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ash. Really appreciate it, brother. He does have to run. Cheryl, you are next. Please share with us what is the current status of obviously where things are with the New York Health Act and what everyone can do to get involved.
Yeah, what's the place? Where can people go to get the information?
And we have to look at, it just so happens, Cheryl, that my aunt lives in Harrison. So it just so happens that my aunt's state senator is Andrea Cousins. And if that's not enough, my aunt is, she's actually a doctor and she's in the GOP. So of course, it is, it's a conversation worth having though, because she she's not an ungettable person, but having somebody like her to talk to about Senator Cousins would obviously be good. So please share with us what else.
What can we do?
What can we do and what we need to know?
You're late, Scat.
Thank you. No, I think this tipping point where we are has two pieces. One is the tipping point that people are fed up with the current system, and we are there. I think that tipping point has been reached. The other part of this tipping point is that people feel okay about the solution, and we are not there yet. And I think conversations like this, these really complex issues, to have one-on-one grassroots conversations to demystify the New York Health Act, the single payer, to demystify, to get rid of the myths and to educate people on this solution. It will make people's lives better, to educate on what's really happening with the system that they think is okay for them today. That other part of the tipping point has to happen. It's urgent, and anybody who can get engaged, this conversation is one step, but the more we can get out there and get the word out that this solution is not scary, I think we'll have reached both of those and we can get this done.
Where can people find your organization, and where can people support your push in New York? Because even though we're like leap years behind and a lot of places don't have the hope that you do, we need to support New York, guys. We need to support wherever it's going to happen. So where can we support?
The starting point is the Campaign for New York Health. They have a website. That's where all of the activists kind of come together and have the broader coalition. And then there are grassroots groups that are part of that we're part of. Long Island Activists is one who is really pushing these deep grassroots conversations, which is where I think the minds and hearts get changed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that this is, we do maintain that New York is definitely where it's probably most likely to happen first. Definitely agree with Roger Meadows. It would definitely make a lot of sense to go into the more rural states to do a ballot initiative.
If they allow them.
Yes. Well, listen, listen, we could call him President DeSantis, as I am doing,
Oh,
because President DeSantis, yes, he did veto, rightfully so, that anti-solar bill, but he also decided to sign into law an anti-ranked choice voting bill. Isn't that lovely? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because, they're so for democracy. Both parties suck. They both suck.
They suck.
We all know that it's all about monopolization of the power vacuum when it comes to voting. So why give other people any other ideas? And the Democrats are just as guilty of it. We saw what they did to the Greens in Wisconsin. So at the end of the day, they don't want you to have other choices. That's the reality.
So guys, go to the New York Health Campaign. It's nyhcampaign.org and spread it. Even if you can't afford to donate, but I'm sure that they would appreciate donations because they have a big ground game to cover.
They do.
So, guys, show the love. These are more important than a lot of the candidates that you think are important.
And if you want to know what the big difference between New York and California, New York really has a ground game, like they really do. And that to me is going to be that's what's ultimately going to win the day.
Yeah.
That's why we are confident that Nina Turner has a real shot to win this election, even though the fundraising is not what obviously you would like it to be, but the ground game is strong. And that's how AOC beat Crowley. She was outspent 10-1, but she had a hell of a lot more boots on the ground and was a much more likable candidate. And so I think these types of campaigns are really where it's at. And finally, Wendell, please share with us what you're currently working on and what you would recommend from the perspective of, I've been on the inside, I know what these guys are going to do, this is what you got to look out for, and this is what you can do to advance even further.
I think we have to we have to name the villain. And the villain, in my view, in this, more than the pharmaceutical companies, more than the hospitals, it really is the unnecessary middlemen in our system that are sucking so much money out of our system. If you just took that and diverted that to universal coverage, we wouldn't have to raise anybody. Well, we wouldn't have to raise anybody taxes to start with. But that's one of the things I will be doing. I'm watching very closely how these companies are making money, where they're spending it. Almost all of their revenues these days are coming from public programs like Medicare and Medicaid, Medicare Advantage programs. It's just insane what they're doing. The other thing that I wanted to mention to you, though, is you're exactly right. New York may be where it happens first. I was fortunate to be invited to testify at a field hearing in Kingston, New York, just before the pandemic began. You're right. There is a good ground game there. There's a lot of support for it, and obviously a lot of support from the lawmakers that were at that hearing. that day. So the other things I'm working on, as I mentioned earlier, as part of an effort to help people understand just how bad these guys are, how they're saddling us with high deductibles that we can't even use our health insurance. Check out loopcoalition.org. It stands for Lower Out of Pockets Now, which is a growing coalition. We're forming a caucus in Congress. So follow that and follow our work. You can follow me at Wendell Potter on Twitter.
Wait, is it org or .co?
No, Loop Coalition. Oh, is it loopcoalition.co? Is that
It's
what
coming
it
up
is?
as .co.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. .co works. .com. .org works as well.
Oh, it does. Okay.
Oh, okay. All right.
Either.
That's
Okay.
great to know. And Steve is right. You know, Wendell, it takes a lot of courage to do what you do.
Yes.
There are, unfortunately, not enough people that have been in that line of work that have been willing to come forward and basically say, yeah, it's a giant scam and we've been running it forever. And, you know, it's going to eventually end. And what they don't realize is that they can hasten it a lot sooner by doing the same thing. Unfortunately, money talks and justice walks. That is something a professor of mine in high school taught me a long time ago. But we are taking back justice in a different way in the United States. With individuals like yourself and collectively, as we continue to have these conversations, we are going to get to universal health care sooner rather than later. So Cheryl Cashin, Wendell Potter.
And thank you,
guys.
Cheryl, for jumping in last minute and covering
Yes.
for your state senator. I know that he has a lot of things on his plate, so we appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much
Thank
for all
you,
that you do.
guys.
And we'll
Thank you
see you
all.
soon.
Take care.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, I can't believe you brought up Roe after he just endorsed what's his face in Philadelphia against Alexandra Hunt.
I'm gonna make a point though about that. I don't think that was a silly decision.
I don't
There
think
is
he's
no
a
point.
progressive anymore.
He
I
probably
don't.
is.
I'm sorry. You
No, maybe he isn't.
well, clearly you're going to support
I'm gonna say,
corporate
I
war
want to make
incumbent.
it. I want to make a point. Look, if you're gonna run for office, you have to know that there are certain things that you can't do if you want to be taken seriously as a candidate. And this message goes out directly to Alexandra Hunt. Starting an OnlyFans is not what a serious candidate does.
Well, let me tell you though, Alexandra is in a very interesting position.
Sure.
Okay. She is in a unique position. And what she's trying to do is she's trying to dictate the narrative as opposed to being told about her. And I'm not going to comment on what is right for her or her campaign because she's a very different candidate and has a very different backstory. And I don't think you can say that in that way. I think she's got to ride that horse that its direction it's going in her district. And she's getting a lot of crap for having a past profession.
No, I don't think there's anything wrong with embracing that. I think that there's a complete difference between saying, yeah, I've been a stripper and I am controlling the narrative. But then it's another thing entirely to start a website which is basically known for people going there for sexual gratification.
I know.
Like that's.
I didn't realize that she had started a page like
that.
No,
she did. See, that's not good. And whoever on her campaign didn't step in to stop that, shame on you.
Well, I wonder what their thought process was.
But she's probably going to make a lot of money off of it.
No,
and if that's going to help with the campaign, I mean, maybe it will. But
I don't see how you can make a lot of money off of it if you're not taking your clothes off.
That's because she probably is.
No, I don't think so. Don't say that. I disagree.
Then what is the point?
I don't know. But I'm not. There's no way that she's doing that right now. I'm sorry.
I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I want to be wrong.
That's not happening. Let's yeah.
She is doing this before. Yeah, well, of course, Scat would say something like that.
Yeah, Scat.
Okay, Blue. So what you're saying is that she's
before the company.
Before the election, you mean? Well, I think that this thing is. I mean, if you go to her Instagram page, she made a video about it. I mean, apparently it's up. So
she is not taking her clothes off.
All right,
anymore.
listen, like I said,
she's not.
All right, but why start an OnlyFans?
I don't know.
Why even allow that type of a perception to be out there?
Because it is anyway. and that they're trying to control the narrative. I get it. They're putting that out there.
Yeah, fair enough. Billy definitely has something to say that.
So what else did you want to talk about? I didn't watch the crap networks today, so I don't know what they're all. I'm sure they're still banging war drums for
We've
Ukraine.
got two things that we want to talk about before we go. Number one, hats off to our governor.
Yeah.
That is absolutely the correct thing to do.
And by the way, this is why when people want to hate on him so much, it's not black and white.
No.
He has done things,
Especially for the environment.
yes,
And we have said
yes,
that
from
he
the
has
beginning.
been correct about.
Yeah, and for people who are coming on, so Governor DeSantis vetoed the solar anti-net metering bill that our Democrat and Republicans have passed in this
For the
state.
Democratic organizations, including the Florida conservation voters who support Debbie Wasserman Schultz, let's be clear about that.
She's such a conservationist.
Such a conservationist, and you know that their votes aren't worth anything if they're going to be voting on that, because that's ridiculous. This is a person who has profited off of, and let me tell you something. If Jen runs against her again, I am going to shove that in their face every single day. That Debbie is a profiteer of the fracking industry.
Yeah.
And if you endorse her again, your organization is a joke.
Well, they
and
are
everyone
anyway.
should know that.
Yeah.
So let's just be clear.
Well, I don't value endorsements. I've learned people. It's endorsements don't mean anything. You can wipe your ass with the paper.
If the Democratic organizations want to take a victory lap because the advocacy was there, and I'm not going to say that it wasn't. I'm sure that it was. We have been advocating hard against the anti-solar bill. We bring it up every show. Every time we're involved with a local effort, we always talk about this.
We went
bill.
on Jordan Chariton's show to
specifically
talk about the
this.
solar bill.
If you're not going to give Governor DeSantis any credit at all for vetoing this bill, you want to take all of the credit. You're taking all of the credit for this bill getting 86th. Wait till you see how bad this gets in November.
Well, but yet, where were you taking any accountability for the 3 Democrats that signed on to it in the first place? Why is nobody talking about those people?
If those 3 Democrats, Representative Bracey, Senator Bracey, Senator Powell, and Senator Torres, if they had voted no, this never would have had a chance to get to DeSantis's desk and allow him to get immense political capital off of it.
Which is why it's like when you watch this, it's like it really looks like the Democrats are trying to lose and push DeSantis at the same time. But when people want to know, like, I can't possibly hate him as much as they want me to, when they keep basically they're throwing him, what do you call it?
They threw him a bone.
Right. Well, it's not. It's like
a political football.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. They basically handed him this victory, and now they're going to complain. I'm actually looking forward to November. I think it's going to be really interesting. I always my little emoji is like this little popcorn bag that I like to use because I'm just going to be sitting there and watching the Democrats get their asses handed to them.
They I mean, honestly, guys, look, it's one thing to say that there was a lot of activism against this. But the fact that you don't bring up the fact that the only reason this got to his desk is because the Democrats helped it get there.
Right.
And DeSantis was in a win-win situation no matter what he did. He couldn't take any of the amount of heat that he could have if this was strictly a GOP operation. The Democrats already helped him get there. And then he decides to veto it and shove it in both parties' faces.
It's the truth.
This is what the Trump voter loves. And this is a guy who is palatable to those suburbanites that went to Biden in 2020 that will sure as hell go to DeSantis if he's the nominee.
Yeah.
And that is the reality. You made this happen. And the fact that you couldn't even give DeSantis credit for vetoing this bill.
No.
You made it like you're the reason why this didn't get that this didn't pass. It's not true.
Yeah. No, it's really I appreciate that about him. I do. And again, we had Rick Scott for 8 years. So, our bar is low here.
Roger, thank you for your amazing support tonight. Really meant a lot.
Yeah, unbelievable. Everybody's been really.
We're not
supportive.
trying to support DeSantis.
No.
You are forcing people's hands with these actions.
Well, and the fact that they don't have anybody worthy to challenge him.
Correct.
You know, that's the other problem, is that we live in.
And listen, you know what? We're probably going to have Charlie Crist on the podcast at some point, and we'll talk about that. But when, you know, I was even having a conversation earlier about, well, Charlie Crist is smooth. I know he's smooth. I've known him for years.
He's a chameleon.
But he has raised, I think, less than 10 million at this point, and DeSantis is already over 100 million.
Yeah.
Like,
please,
guys, come on. I know that there is.
It's not happening.
It's overrated to a degree in terms of money, because you can have all the money in the world as long as the candidate who's running against you can compete, meaning that they have to have enough to do what is necessary in order to run the operation. But in this case, this is.
Well, it's not just that. I think you don't necessarily need to have the money to compete, but if you don't, you better have the grassroots behind you.
Correct.
And he can't do that. So if you're not going to have the money and you don't have the grassroots, you've got nothing.
And I really don't know. I mean, look.
I don't hate Charlie Crist.
I don't either. I think listen, Charlie is a very nice man. He is probably one of the few truly nice people that have made it that far in politics, because he's made it far.
He's switched so many. He's such a chameleon that I think that turns off a lot of people.
Yeah,
and
sure.
and I certainly don't think he is inspired enough to rally the troops.
But if the Democratic Party has proven anything, especially in this state, they don't fundraise well, and as long as it is under the thumb of Wasserman Schultz, you really have a Democratic Republican Party. That's what you have.
I would call it more of a Republican Democrat Party.
Well, whatever you want to call it, the nominee, because let's face it, he is the de facto nominee now, because now you've got State Senator Lori Berman, State Senator Tina Polsky. They're all coming out and endorsing him now. And, you know, Pelosi came out and endorsed him.
And yet I still see people, and then you see organizations endorsing Nikki Fried.
Which doesn't make any sense.
Well, none of it makes sense, because none of them are going to be. Ron DeSantis isn't even running for governor.
You can at least make the argument. You can at least make the argument, because, like I said, I was in the room in Orlando, and I can tell you, as soon as I walked out of that room, and this was months ago, I said, "Oh, Charlie's the nominee." Like, it's not even a question, and he can at least do a decent job in a debate against DeSantis. That I do believe he can do. But the other candidates that are there, I don't know what their motivation is at this point.
Well, we know. We do.
Obviously, if there was, our good friend Marina informed us that the situation is basically this. If you give up, if you choose to run for a higher office while you're an elected official, you have the right to resign, which means that you cannot go back to that seat. So in this case, you have these candidates that are not going to go back. And so as a result, and I think it's pretty obvious, because of that fact, I would be shocked if it's not Charlie and Annette Taddeo again. Now, is it possible that it could be Charlie and Nikki? Yeah, it's possible. But it's basically going to be 2014 all over again.
That's what I would call regressive. Yeah, we're going backwards here, people. I still haven't seen a map of our new district. So apparently we have a new district.
I have seen it, and I can tell you.
Well, I saw it from afar, but I want to see the close line. So apparently our district, for anyone who's familiar, District 23.
It just so happens it's District 25 now. And what's even more insane, but this just goes to show you that this is Florida and nothing
now
makes
I'm
sense.
25?
You're 25. So that makes no sense.
Twitter handle.
Yeah, I know, really. District 25 is north of District 24. So Florida really doesn't know.
Well, we were north of 20 before, because Alcee came down around under us under Miramar.
Yeah, but technically it started at the north. This district really starts at the south.
Well, the numbers aren't what's important, but what is important, people, and we believe.
Jen just happens to be in the district literally by a street.
But that's not the better part. The better part is we no longer have Miami-Dade in our district.
When it comes to being able to work the district, this is much more advantageous
for us.
The other thing that's advantageous about this particular district is that it now includes Miramar, which is the home of our friend and current congressional representative, Sheila Sherfilis McCormick. I got it right.
But here's the thing, and we don't really know, because the truth is we don't know what the impact will be, but we suspect that the new district does not benefit Debbie. She is not happy about this. Now, the fact that she lost Dade is huge.
Yeah.
Because Aventura in particular is an area that for a
Very
grassroots,
old, affluent Jewish.
well, and also almost impossible to canvass.
Correct.
Aventura is
Miami in general was impossible to canvass. And the one areas we were able to canvass was Surfside, and we did, and even Bay Harbor Islands, and we did well there. But the problem is that this is a very wealthy part of North Miami Beach. And as a result of that, you're only going to be able to meet a handful of people.
No, the thing about Aventura, for people who aren't from here, is it's all condos, all gated. All gated, all condos. You can't canvass there. So the only way to reach the people in that community is through TV and mailers. So when you're grassroots, that's a disadvantage. Debbie just lost that. And that's a big deal. And what we've gained is Miramar. Miramar, which is, I would say, a mix of Black and Latino. And it'll be very interesting to see how she will do now, losing a lot of the wealthy Jews that were part of our district.
And not only that, but the district is very much like Pembroke Pines in the sense that it runs east to west. So there's a lot of canvassing territory that one can cover.
Much better in Miramar for
much
us.
better.
We are much better served with this district.
Yeah.
Let's just say we, when I say we, the grassroots people
will have a much better opportunity to knock on doors, meet with constituents, and potentially convert people than you ever could have with the Miami-Dade district. And Debbie really cleaned Jen's clock in Aventura. I mean, it's just
because you can't get in there.
It's a big part of it.
And so the fact that she lost that, I mean, she's probably having a, Marsha moment about this whole district.
She's just lucky she isn't losing her district altogether.
Well, they could have made it so that she didn't have a blue advantage. But this new district, I do think is an advantage to a grassroots campaign.
I do.
It's much more manageable. I'm so thankful we don't have to go schlep down in that traffic anymore. He's right. Aventura traffic is a nightmare. And so,
Well, Jen, you always like to tell the story. Jen is a second-generation Jew from North Miami. Aventura, the way it looks today, looks nothing like it did even 30 years ago.
Yeah, Aventura to me, it's like that wasn't even a city. The fact that that's a city is so funny to me because we were unincorporated Dade County. So what has now become that sort of, it's like a concrete jungle. I mean, it's outrageous.
It's not as bad as Sunny Isles.
No, nothing's as bad as Sunny Isles.
But it's still pretty bad. And so the last thing I want to mention this evening.
Okay, Scat.
The last thing I want to mention this evening, which I think is important, is this is the last time you're going to hear from us until Monday because we are going to Cleveland on Friday to help Nina Turner.
They don't usually hear from us other than that anyway.
That's true. Well, you may hear from us there. You never know.
And clips might not be fast to upload because it's not easy for me to do them from away.
Sure.
So
we'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens, guys. But yeah, we're going. I actually spoke to Katie from Nina's campaign today. I made sure that they put us in the tribes area because I think that's where I can be most effective.
I do think that is fun.
But yeah, so we're going to be up in Cleveland. They have us scheduled for Saturday and Sunday. We'll be canvassing. We're going to be in Cleveland Heights and Shaker Heights. I'm going to be trying to reason with the Jews that are being brainwashed by special interest money that tries to portray Nina as anti-Semitic.
BS.
It's just ludicrous.
But
it's so ludicrous.
I have to say, and you know what? I'm not somebody who I am not somebody. I don't like to block people on social media. I actually like to see what they have to say.
Oh, I block people.
And I think that it's necessary to understand where they're coming from.
I don't.
But Nina finally had enough of Jimmy Dore today.
Ooh, what happened?
So Jimmy, like he always does, decides that he's going to...
I hate even talking about him and giving him airtime here.
Habitually harass her, doesn't let up, continues to do what he does, which is basically go after Nina repeatedly, over and over again.
Even though she came and spoke at his ridiculous event.
Mm-hmm. and
his-
said that, well, she
oh my
really
God.
changed over time. And so,
No, who changed over time is him.
So Jimmy, in his haste, says, FYI, the Congressional Progressive Caucus doesn't want you in Congress. But I appreciate you have to pretend that Democrats somehow on the side of the people instead of what they really are. A pro-war, pro-Wall Street, anti-worker party that you still want progressives to support.
Oh my God.
Jimmy?
He's such a moron. He is such a moron.
This is what you get and what everybody should be doing with
They can't see.
you.
What does it say?
Nina Turner blocked.
Yeah,
And
enough.
rightfully
But
so.
see, that's why I don't even like to mention him. I don't want to give that
But
credit.
the point is, Nina, you know, I mean, I love this lady like I've never loved anybody in
She's the
politics
best.
before.
She's the best.
And the fact that you attack her the way that you do, like you attack AOC, like you attack all of these people, it would be one thing if you actually had a viable third party. But you associated with Nick Brana, who has completely sunk the People's Party, and whatever movement you thought you had,
Well, I don't think it ever existed anyway.
it's dead. It's dead. And you know what? It's not just Nina Turner who was there. You had a lot of people that were there to support this venture when it first started because I watched it. You had Chris Hedges, you had Dr. Cornel West, you had Marianne Williamson, you had Nina Turner, you had a ton of people of immense influence who believed in what you guys were trying to do.
And
And
yet-
within a short few months, they knew that this was a grift and they got away from it.
Yeah.
You think about this. Think about the fact that you had a podcast for over an hour and a half with Vosh talking about the fact that if you were serious about a third party movement, you would be doing what Andrew Yang is doing right now, and that is advocating for ranked choice voting and open primaries, but you're not doing either thing.
No, all they do is crap on everything else. It's ridiculous. You know what? Yeah, I.
And you want to come after Nina Turner? Nina Turner, who spent probably $500,000 on an advertisement in the Cleveland metropolitan area saying, and I quote, I support Medicare for all.
I don't know how she could be more clear. She was saying it for years. I don't understand why that was ever even called into question. She shouldn't have had to spend that money on that ad. Shame on anybody for putting out that message that she doesn't support Medicare for all. Was that not her on stage with Bernie for like 2 years talking about Medicare for all?
But because she didn't go to your precious Medicare for all march,
Which was
in Columbus, why didn't you do the march in Cleveland? Then you might have had an argument. And even then, it wouldn't have been much, but at least it would have had validity. The fact that you expected a congressional candidate to drive 4 hours to come to your group.
this person is starting to scat. I'm going to start piecing together who you are because you're starting to sort of like show your cards a little bit.
He wants to let you know just a little.
Yeah,
bit.
eventually I'll figure out who it is because he's starting to show his cards. He knows all the names of the people that are the people behind the scenes people.
And the reality is, you were never going anywhere anyway. Because once it became clear that you thought you were just going to field these candidates with no infrastructure and they were automatically going to do this, no, it doesn't work that way. And I feel bad for anybody who invested money in this. Our good friend Renee Johnston made it very clear on our podcast that this was a scam, that they were never doing anything of the sort of what they needed to be doing. And until people fully recognize that that is what needs to happen.
Yeah.
It's never gonna
Well,
change.
I don't, you know what, now, like in looking at it now, yeah, it's a grift. It was a grift. And obviously these people who are promoting that are not really interested in helping people because all they want to do is tear down everybody. They're only interested in getting clicks and promoting whatever it is that
Hey,
their
Jimmy, how
nonsense
come
is.
you're not promoting a universal health care ballot in California? You know, you actually probably could generate some interest in that if you actually cared.
Yeah, he doesn't care. He'd rather just be crapping all over Nina.
And the same is true of any of the other people. And we're not going to name them. We only name Jimmy because, unfortunately, he is the centerpiece of this story because
He's the ringleader.
He is the ringleader.
He's the ringleader of the losers.
Nina Turner, you just honestly, dude,
Get a life. Oh my God.
it really goes to show you that when it comes to like this whole again, we do this because we give a shit. That's the reality. We're not here chasing money. I couldn't believe that we got almost $200 in donations on our campaign, on our podcast tonight.
I would like to say I have a job interview tomorrow morning. I'm just
I'm
saying.
going to say the rest of this is just for nothing.
No, I'm just excited. I'd like to have some money
Yes,
coming in. It would be
absolutely.
nice. As Nina says, we haven't taken a vow of poverty just because we're progressive.
Yeah, for real.
But
And so
yeah.
the people that absolutely can't see that you are on a road to nowhere if you stick with this crap. If legitimate beef is necessary, then you call people out when they're wrong. You know, we are nowhere near where we need to be. And the only way we're going to get there is if we become a well-oiled machine. We are not going to be a well-oiled machine if anyone has anything to do with these nihilistic podcasters. That is what they are. And for some reason, they always want to bring up Jen.
I love it. I'm telling you, my picture up there with Noam Chomsky, you people could not flatter me more. Like, that's like,
I mean, in a way, thank you for, I mean, listen, you know, this is going to make the rounds. So it's, you know,
I don't really
what
care.
it is.
But like, and I block all those people. I don't really care what they have to say. And what's interesting is none of them have that many followers, the people that I block.
No, and they go
Like,
into, and you know, and again, it's like with some of them, and some of them I absolutely sympathize with because they are hurt and they are struggling. But the people that are truly coming after us in a very nefarious kind of way, they're not struggling. Okay, I can assure you that Jimmy Dore is a multimillionaire. He is. So if you really think that what he's going through is something of he's really struggling, no, he's not. Because again, I wouldn't care if he had money, if he was actually doing good with it, and he's doing nothing, less than nothing. He's making this worse.
Right, he's a net negative.
Attacking Nina Turner.
I know. To what end
Screw
is
you,
that?
man. Seriously, why don't you come after me? Why don't you come why don't you come after me? Why don't you have a little powwow with Tim Canova and do your thing, you know? Because I know the crap that you guys said about me.
About
I don't
you?
know. Oh yeah.
They hate on me.
No, but they said that
You were a
they
plant,
accused
right?
me that I was a plant, that I was working for Debbie. Like how
He's not
delusional?
working for
How delusional can some people be? And as our good friend Jordan Chariton said, if Peter Hager is a double agent for Debbie Wasserman Schultz, he's the best double agent in the history of double agents.
Well, I got to tell you, people, he can't possibly be. He doesn't have enough time. He doesn't have enough time to do the stuff that he has. So if he were working another job, I would know.
Yeah, by now I would think so.
By now I would know if he was working for her. And he's really he really hates her.
Yeah, I really
I know. Nobody hates Debbie like he does.
So
I don't even. Oh, by the way, did I tell you on that Discord thing? Somebody asked, because some of the questions were like somewhat funny, like lighthearted, and they're like, "Who would win in a duel between me and between you and Debbie Wasserman Schultz?" And I'm like, "Okay, well, I don't do swords."
Actually, there was a great meme of you in the Kill Bill outfit.
Right. Well, but so I said, but here's the thing. So I think in a real fight, I think that it would be no contest.
Yeah, Jen would.
I think that I would just, I think that it would just be a done deal. And then I mentioned how she did physically assault one of my volunteers, and she conveniently waited till I wasn't on the scene to do so. I would love for her to do that. And I actually did share with the Discord people what I'm about to share with you people. And this is not literal. This is not me threatening her. This is just sort of like we're talking about hypotheticals, like a duel. In my fantasy, I grab her by the Brillo head and I shove it in the toxic blue-green algae that she's making our manatees live in by all the money she takes from the nefarious industries. No, I'm not threatening a sitting representative, but it's like, I'm not. But like, I just thought it was funny, like who would win in a duel between you and Debbie?
Very good.
Oh yeah, that's me.
Very good.
But no, I just think that I just find her so despicable as a human.
If you were to listen, if you lined up the worst representatives in the country, lined them all up, she would make the top 10 guaranteed.
Yeah, she's pretty bad.
No question about it.
Yeah.
And so here we are. We're going to fight the good fight.
What happened to our candidate?
John? I apologize.
Like, you don't tell me anything.
Yes.
I don't know anything. I have on my calendar, we start at 8 with John Moreno-Escobar. Next thing I know, you're like, we're on at 7. And
John unfortunately had an event that he had to go to. We are rescheduling for Monday. So Monday's going to be a great show. Monday, we are going to have none other than Peter Kalmus. He is joining us, the ultimate environmental activist, and I think he may be an astrophysicist or something. He's a really smart guy.
I don't know, but I'm going to be power listening to the book on our flight.
Yeah.
I have it on audiobook.
So Peter is making an exception for our little show.
He tried to sort of like skirt us, but you know what? We're just too likable.
That's what he said. But that's specifically what he said. I just like Jen too much.
Did he really?
Yes, what he said. I'm like, okay, good. Good or not. Hey, whatever works. I mean, we'll take it.
So like whenever you're doubting like my place here, people like me.
And we also will be speaking, and we will be speaking with John Moreno-Escobar on Monday.
And I know most people don't. It's not like that's some popular person.
He's an amazing candidate running for local office, as we talked about. He is running for the Broward County School Board, District 8. That is also where Debbie lives.
Yeah, guys, and school board, we always talk about it. Local elections are so important. And so obviously that's not like a big name that people know, but I think it's important for people to understand. You're going to love the
guy. He's a great guy.
Yeah, no, John.
He's a really great guy, tremendous guy, totally support him.
And what else do we have coming up after that?
And on Wednesday, we are going to have the return of Neil Walia to the show. He is running for Congress, as you know.
First of all, he's adorable.
And he made the ballot in Colorado. So
he's just adorable. And Denver, he's Denver.
Yes.
And I believe that it's not a gerrymander thing. Like it's Denver. Like it's a pretty big block.
So we hope you guys obviously enjoyed the show. We may do a couple of live streams, probably through Facebook or Instagram. We might do a Twitter as well while we're in Cleveland. We have an opportunity to speak with Nina that we can do live.
I found a candy store I want to go to.
And
more importantly,
maybe the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Well, we don't have the time. You know what? I did not commit us for Friday. So we have opening on Friday. We could play on Friday. I did not commit us. So I only committed us for Saturday and Sunday. Jason wants to know, he's like, he feels like, you sure you don't want to stay and see what happens on Tuesday? And I don't know how.
No, I'm kind of that mind because you know what? It's crazy as it sounds, but the greatest night of my sports life was when the Giants beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl in Super Bowl 42, February 3rd, 2008.
It's all about sports.
But what was interesting was that I had the opportunity, my father had the opportunity to get a pair of tickets for us to go to the Super Bowl, and he didn't get them. He said the party, the Super Bowl party, was more important. And as it turns out, he wasn't wrong. There was probably, and I'm not exaggerating here, we had a Super Bowl party at our house.
I still don't think she would look good at Scott because
we had
Kankles.
Yeah.
It's more than it's a whole thing.
And we had an opportunity to go, but we didn't. We had the Super Bowl party, and we had in excess of 50 to 60 people.
I don't see what this has to do with Nina Turner on Tuesday.
What this has to do with is very simple. There is sort of like this karma idea that if I had gone to the Super Bowl, the Giants wouldn't have won the game.
Oh, that is you're ridiculous. Now you're talking. So in other words, Nina lost because we were in town.
But because we're not going to be this time.
We're changing up the mojo.
Karma is going to be on our side, and Nina's going to win. That's what I say.
You know what? I mean, I would stay, but honestly, I don't think that that's necessarily the answer. I mean, although it would suck that I was there for the non-victory party, and then we missed the victory party. Although, you know, you're telling me it's equally as fun when you're not there. I don't know, but we will definitely still be there in spirit. And it's going to be cold. And
we'll see Jordan on Saturday. So he'll be there covering everything. We'll see a lot of people there.
Yeah.
You know, I'm hopeful that Corey Bush will be there. Amy Villella will be there. You know, there will be good people there that will be helping me.
I'll be in Shaker Heights, people. I'm coming for my tribesmen.
Yeah. Jen's going to play a pivotal role in trying to scoop some of those votes.
But I definitely think it's important that they have people like me in those areas.
I think that's absolutely correct.
You know, and I'd be willing. I mean, I'll canvass anywhere, but I'm much more effective canvassing in Shaker Heights than I am in like the Black and brown communities.
I would definitely say you should be canvassing where the most votes of conversion are needed, and I would think that could potentially play a role. So let's hope for the best. You know, we'll do what we can. But our understanding is that the ground game has been solid. So hopefully we can provide an extra helping hand, and let's bring it home for Nina. We'll see you guys on Monday.